let's start right where the global economy seems to be breaking down. At this strange intersection of geopolitics, trade wars, and, well, the bill for your weekly groceries. Have you ever start to think about how Western punishments on Russian energy could completely change the way we look at the global race for artificial intelligence?
It's a fascinating question. We're looking at material today that really lays out this massive system of blowback, where, policies designed to hit adversaries are ironically delivering the most severe pain right back here to the U.S. consumer.
And in some cases, even boosting our biggest rivals.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to connect the dots between three crises that seem separate but are deeply intertwined: the energy attrition war, these bizarre international trade deals, and the affordability crunch hitting every U.S. household. So we've seen these major hits on Russian oil, but the West seems to be in this state of perpetual regret over it. I mean, we're seeing gasoline and diesel prices spiking back to levels we haven't seen since before 2017.
And what's so fascinating here is the directness of it all. It's an immediate feedback loop. You take millions of barrels of Russian diesel and gasoline off the world market.
And that void just instantly drives up prices everywhere else.
Instantly. It feeds directly into CPI inflation. And the immediate winners, of course, are the big Western refiners. Their margins just skyrocket. But that inflation, it lands squarely on the consumer.
But is the policy even working? I mean, strategically, Russian refining is already down about 10%. They're at 5 million barrels a day. And now new sanctions are coming for major players like Lukoil. Is any of this actually crippling their economy?
Well, that raises the really important question about Russian adaptation, right? Their revenues did fall, sure. They were down about 20% to 13.1 billion in October. But Russia's become incredibly adept at this. They're playing a serious game of whack-a-mole with the sanctions regime. They're deploying new shell companies. They've dramatically expanded this shadow fleet of tankers.
The shadow fleet. We hear that term a lot. But can you put a number on it? Just how effective is this workaround?
It's proving to be remarkably effective. I mean, the data shows that just 3 new firms, and these firms have only been operational since May.
Since May.
Yes,
Right.
just since May. And they exported 1 million barrels a day of Russian crude and products last month alone. Russia is basically building its own parallel global supply chain in real time.
Okay, so if the G7 nations are obeying the sanctions and stepping away from those barrels, who's rushing in to pick up that discount? Who wins here?
Well, the big winners are unambiguously China and India. Beijing's imports of this discounted Russian crude just went ballistic in October. They bought nearly 4 billion euros worth of crude oil alone.
4 billion.
And that's just crude. You factor in everything else, LNG, coal, pipeline gas, and their total energy imports were closer to 6 billion euros. They're locking in a massive supply advantage.
Okay, but why should someone listening in the U.S. really care if China gets cheaper energy? It feels so distant compared to, their own grocery bill.
Because it's absolutely critical to understanding the second-order effects. I mean, what is the defining technological and economic battle of our time? It's the AI race between the U.S. and China.
Right.
And what's the one non-negotiable requirement for training these massive AI models, for running data centers? It's enormous amounts of cheap, sustained energy.
Bank of America had that note: no power, no AI.
Exactly.
But
So by creating this convenient, discounted outlet for Russian oil, because Russia has to sell it somewhere, these sanctions are ironically empowering China's foundational energy grid.
we're giving them a strategic advantage.
A huge one. That lower energy cost translates directly into an advantage in the AI race. We are, maybe inadvertently, strengthening the economic foundation of our primary technological rival.
That is a severe second-order effect. So sanctions on foreign oil become inflation at home. But that's not the only policy doing this. Let's pivot to trade, because tariffs, which were supposed to protect us, are also a huge source of this inflation.
And we're starting to see this strange crack in the policy front. The administration is now actively working to exempt tariffs on specific items that aren't grown here.
Like what?
They've specifically mentioned things like coffee and bananas, with the stated goal of quickly bringing down prices for consumers.
Hold on. If they're exempting tariffs on coffee just to lower prices, isn't that a public admission that their own tariff policy is a direct cause of inflation?
It absolutely is. They're essentially putting out a fire that they started. It's a concession that tariffs are a tax on the U.S. consumer, full stop.
Speaking of, let's say, contradictory policies, what about that deal with Switzerland? It was sold as this major win to reshore industry. The plan was to get key Swiss industries, pharma, tech, gold refining, to build factories here.
That's right. And the headline number was huge, a promise of at least $200 billion in investment by 2028. On the surface, that sounds like a massive concrete victory for these strong-arm trade tactics.
So what's the twist? What's in the fine print?
The fine print is in the official Swiss readout. They didn't sign a firm, binding contract. They signed a non-binding Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU.
A non-binding MOU.
Yes, it's a crucial distinction. An MOU is basically a statement of shared intent. It's a handshake. It is not a legal or financial commitment written in stone.
So that $200 billion figure is just an aspiration. It's based on a promise with no legal teeth.
Precisely. And what's more, it's just described as a plan to be achieved by the end of 2028. There are no specifics on which companies, what kind of funding, is new investment, or just business they would have done anyway. It gives them enormous flexibility.
So whether it's inflation from energy sanctions or from tariffs, it's the U.S. consumer who pays the bill. And this affordability crisis is just getting worse.
It really is. The data on basic necessities is, well, it's shocking. U.S. grocery prices are exploding. The average cost for a family of four is now crossing $1,000 a month.
$1,000.
$1,000. And since 2017, overall food prices are up more than 37%.
37%. I mean, for a typical family, that fundamentally changes everything. That's hundreds of dollars just gone before you even think about rent or a car payment.
And it explains this bifurcation we see in the economy.
Well,
You've got this rise of tech and AI in one narrow corner, while the average consumer is just getting crushed.
it's not just the cost, it's the lack of any buffer.
There is no buffer. We're at a tipping point. 66% of U.S. consumers are now living paycheck to paycheck. That's up from 60% just 2 years ago.
So can that AI investment boom really sustain the entire economy if the consumer, the actual engine of demand, is completely tapped out?
That's the central question, isn't it? 70% of U.S. GDP is consumer-driven. You cannot rely on one narrow sector to prop everything up when two-thirds of the population has no purchasing power left.
Which brings us to this really crucial analysis from the Federal Reserve about tariff history. It suggests that if tariffs get severe enough, they do eventually lead to lower inflation.
Right, but for the worst possible reason.
And deflationary spiral.
Exactly. If costs keep rising from tariffs and consumers are already at their limit, the market just buckles. Consumption collapses. And when no one is buying anything, you get a massive deflationary shock.
And what does that do to the job market?
The Fed study is pretty clear. The higher the effective tariff rate goes, and we're over 17% today, the higher unemployment spikes. They estimate a 15% tariff increase could spike unemployment by 3 to 6% a year later.
So the policy designed to protect U.S. jobs ends up destroying demand and sparking a recession.
It's the ultimate blowback loop.
So we've mapped out this incredibly complex system where sanctions boomerang back as inflation, trade deals are really just non-binding plans, and the core consumer economy is collapsing even while high-tech is booming. There are some big cracks forming.
The key thing to recognize here is the deep contradiction. The pursuit of these big geopolitical goals through energy and trade policy is directly causing severe economic pain at home. It's setting the stage for a potential large-scale deflationary shock, driven simply by a lack of consumer spending power.
So here's the final question. What's your take on this? Considering that policies like tariffs might ultimately crush consumption and spark mass unemployment, are we heading into a situation where the policy itself is actually worse than the disease it was trying to solve? Something for you to ponder.